Welcome back, and thanks so much for staying with us on The Real Story. Wednesday, our legislators will return to their seats in the Connecticut State Capitol for the 2023 legislative session. On this special episode of The Real Story, President Pro Tempore, Democratic Senator Martin Looney, and Minority Leader Republican Senator Kevin Kelly. Thank you both so much for being here with us this morning.
Well, good morning. Happy to be with you, and Happy New Year to you and to all your viewers.
Yes, Happy New Year. Well, we're going to get started into our questions now. We're heading back to the chambers this week, as we mentioned. How are you both feeling about the upcoming session? Martin, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm very excited about the upcoming session. I think we're coming back ready to do a lot of good things for the people of the state of Connecticut. I think that with Governor Lamont having won re-election by the margin that he did and increasing Democratic majorities in the legislature, I think people are generally in approval of our direction and our programs. And there are a lot of challenges. I think we need to continue to focus on what was part of our focus last session about looking at the needs of children, pre-K programs, preschool programs, early childhood ed, also expanded availability for counseling, mental health counseling for children, because in many cases we find that there's not access to those services. So some of the things that were in some of the major bills we did last year will be a precursor to what we'll be doing this year. Education funding continues to be an issue, and there are always those challenges that we deal with.
And Kevin.
Well, we're very optimistic. Obviously, a new year brings new ideas, and we're going to continue to offer Connecticut new ideas in a better way, because we know that Connecticut families continue to struggle. Basic necessities aren't being met. Connecticut is unaffordable. So we're going to get right into it and look at ways to make it more affordable for kitchen table economics, whether that's health care, to energy, to tax relief. A lot of these ideas that we came up with last year were put into law this year, and so we're going to continue at that to make sure that the middle class voice is heard.
Absolutely. Martin, you mentioned Governor Lamont winning re-election. He's heading in for a third term. Do you think...
Second term.
A second term, excuse me. Oh my goodness, I was thinking ahead. Do you think your and the governor's priorities align for this upcoming session?
In many ways, they do. I know the governor has talked about providing some middle-class tax relief by perhaps changing some of the rate structure on the state income tax. We're certainly going to consider that. One of the things we'd also like to consider is expanding or making sure that we continue the state child tax credit that was passed for a one-year period only using federal funds. Also, when we raised the level of reimbursement for the state earned income tax credit, which is 40% of what people get in the federal credit, we'd like to make that permanent as well, using state dollars to replace the federal dollar. So and also the property tax credit on the income tax is another way. So there are different ways of providing tax relief, either by changing rates or by doing it in terms of targeted initiatives toward people who need it most.
And Kevin, I know there's been obviously some disagreements, some consensus. For you, is there anything that you feel your priorities line up, and what are some of those other ones, if not?
Well, I think our priorities line up in the area of some tax reform. We like broad-based support, like lowering the income tax. We think that's good. We also like to extend the gas tax holiday to keep that quarter off every gallon of gas, and we offered that. We also believe that the bond locks, that everybody agrees have really brought a lot of fiscal stability to the state of Connecticut, need to remain intact the way they are. So I think that's where we see eye to eye. I think there's more work can be done. I think we've got to look at ways to make energy more affordable. We need to make health care more affordable. The majority has been in power now for 12 years, and yet a lot of these issues have not been addressed. And so we're going to be right back at it. We're going to be looking at taking the over-collection of taxes and making sure it works for most Connecticut families, and not necessarily just looking at tax credits where somebody has to pay a tax in order to get a benefit back. Everybody doesn't own a home, everybody doesn't have children, but if you do something that's broad-based, that helps all.
One of those controversial points, the highway use fee, also known as the truck tax, it's going into effect today. It's supposed to drum up a lot of revenue for transportation improvements, but from some lawmakers I spoke to, there are already talks about possibly introducing a bill to repeal it in the next session. I know a lot of people wary about it. Kevin, we'll start with you. Highway use fee, what's the stance there?
Well, of course, when we're sitting in a budget that has an operational surplus, which is an over over-collection of taxes in the millions, billions actually, where we're taking over $15 million a day more than we need for the current operational budget, there's no reason why we have to add more taxes and more burden onto middle-class families. And this burden, when you truck goods and services throughout the state of Connecticut, only increases the cost. So our groceries that are already expensive are going to go up. Our services that we rely on, whether, whatever's going on, those are going to go up. And so we want to give relief to families. This is one area where we already have too much money, and it's time to say enough and let the people get a break because they need it.
Well, Martin, I know some Democrats I've spoken to about this have said it's really not going to be as big of an impact on Connecticut families. They say other states around Connecticut already have a similar fee. How do you feel about that?
Well, that's exactly right. We need the revenue from this truck tax, and it is structured in a way that the higher rate applies to trucks that are the heaviest and impose the most burden of wear and tear on our roads. It's a very minimal amount, far less than what people are paying in other states in tolls, like crossing the bridges in New York. The trucks will pay far more than they would ever pay in this, but it is necessary also. I think we have to think ahead because the money will go into our transportation fund. We all say we support infrastructure improvement and expansion of construction projects all over our state. But if you look ahead, we rely primarily on the gasoline tax for that. As more and more people buy electric vehicles, there'll be less and less money coming into that fund. We need an alternate way of helping to fund the transportation fund going out. This is one of the ways of doing that. And I disagree that we have been overtaxing. We have for years been struggling with deficits, and it's only in the last few years that we were able to overcome the deficits and now have a robust budget reserve fund, as also being able to, and as well as being able to address the pension contributions into both the state employees pension fund and the teachers retirement fund. Those were all necessary things we needed to do, and we have not overtaxed at all. We are just trying to meet our responsibilities and obligations, and we have finally reached a point where we're not in desperate straits, but we cannot neglect the fact or ignore the fact that just a few years ago we were in a deep hole, and we can't start forfeiting revenues that we may need going forward the next time there is a decline in the economy, and also when the federal money that we've been enjoying for the last few years comes to an end.
Well, something we can all agree on is inflation. It's impacting people's wallets and people's bottom lines here, especially in Connecticut. So are there discussions about legislative action this session to possibly provide some relief for constituents? Martin, we'll start with you and then we'll go to Kevin.
Well, in terms of relief for constituents, we are looking to try to continue and build upon the free community college bill that we passed. We know that students at other public universities need help as well. We need to continue to increase funding, actually, both for UConn and the CSU system, because even though public colleges are less expensive than private, it's still a burden for many moderate income families. We need to put more money into our higher education system. We also need to be able, if possible, to accelerate the funding that we committed to a few years ago in terms of the new ECS formula. Many would like to see the full implementation of that formula implemented sooner rather than later, so it would provide more relief to municipalities. And from what I hear all the time, the tax that people find the most burdensome in Connecticut is not any tax that is levied directly by the state, but by the local property tax that people pay. And in many reasons for that is because we have been unable with the state tax structure to provide enough support to municipalities to offset that burden on the local property tax. And there's so much inequity in that. In fact, I had a study done recently that shows that there are some communities in Connecticut where people are paying more than 4% of the market value of the assessed value of their homes every year in property taxes. In other very affluent communities, they're paying less than 1% of the value. Some communities have mill rates of 11 because their property is so valuable. Others have mill rates, 5 times that. So the real inequity in our tax system is in the property tax, and we need to find ways to address that.
Kevin.
Well, the thing about taxes in Connecticut, and we can talk about a highway truck tax, you can talk about local property tax, but we have one of the worst tax burdens in the country. I think it's the second worst, and Connecticut families feel that. And I think it's not only inflation, but it's also the tax burden. And when you have a government that has a budget that is taking in more revenue than it needs, and still meeting, and we had a plan putting forward that would still meet all the obligations with regards to pension and debt, we need to start looking at how can we help Connecticut families. An income tax break would help, not only for working people, but also for pension and Social Security. Looking at ways to help people pay for their energy costs. costs. We've been dogged on this to make sure that we adequately fund the LIHEAP program, and I think that needs to be addressed. I think we need to look at workforce development. We need to give people an opportunity and to get better jobs and make sure that the training and development is there going forward, so that not only is there going to have the effects on the kitchen table of both taxes and inflation, but then give them the keys to opportunity and prosperity so that they can get that better job. I think that's important, and to make sure that our educational system prepares our students going forward.
And I wish, sorry.
So it's an exciting year, and that's why we're so optimistic, because I think there's a lot of work to be done.
Yep, didn't mean to cut you off
okay.
there, but we're running out of time quickly. So last question here, quick answer. You guys are busy at the Capitol through June, but a lot of people at home might not even know what's going on until they see that bill go into effect and impact them later on, almost at the next year. So for both of you, we'll start with Kevin and then go to Martin. How do you think people can stay up to date on what's happening, and how can they get involved in this legislative process?
Well, they can always go to the website, the cga.ct.gov. And see what's happening. Try to follow it on the local media, such as Fox 61. Stay tuned with what's going on, and just contact your local legislator, whether it's a state senator or state representative. Just ask what's going on. I think we're accessible. We're in the community. We live in our neighborhoods, and I think that's what's important, to try and find out what's going on. We want to know as much as they need to know.
Absolutely, and with Martin and involvement, people can give public comment once things go through the legislature, can't they?
Well, obviously, when public hearings are being held, Connecticut, unlike most other states, requires a public hearing on every bill that a committee is going to take action on. That's not true in other states. We have a much more inviting process for the public than is true in large parts of the country. So I would certainly agree with Senator Kelly that people should be paying close attention to the news, but also they're tuning into the state website, watching us on our deliberations on CTN, but also contacting their legislators if they have any questions. And we are always doing outreach. And we are doing, mailings or teletown halls or informational meetings on the weekends. So there's a lot of outreach going on that people can learn a great deal from if they're interested.
Yeah, well, thank you both so much again for being here. We appreciate it. That does it for us on The Real Story this morning. We will, of course, be covering the legislative session in its entirety, from budgets to bills you care about. For those stories or to watch these segments again, you can head to fox61.com or download the Fox 61 app and watch The Real Story every Sunday at 10 a.m. right here on Fox 61. In case you missed an episode or want to watch one again, you can head to Fox 61 Plus, available on Amazon and Roku. Have a great rest of your morning, and Happy New Year.